Do you believe in premonitions? Maybe if a budding young actor in the 1950s had believed in the words from a future Jedi, then the history of Hollywood would be quite different. It sounds cryptic, so let me explain more. Over 70 years ago, in September 1955, a movie star climbed into his Porsche 550 and was soon to become immortalized in Hollywood history, for he would die in a head-on collision. At the age of 24, his young life was tragically cut short. James Dean, or Jimmy as he liked to call himself, was an aspiring actor who in his brief time in Hollywood made 3 films. The movie Rebel Without a Cause starred the young actor in a role that cemented his stardom. With his rugged good looks combined with sensitivity, he brought the role alive and was destined to make many more movies. But Jimmy was just as complicated off-screen as he was on and always sought out new challenges. One of these was a love of racing cars, and as soon as his movie obligations were over, he followed his passion. Jimmy had raced a Porsche 356 in numerous races in California, but there were better and faster cars out there, and he hankered for something class-beating. On the 21st of September, Dean was told by his good friend Lou Bracker that a silver Porsche 550 was up for sale in Competition Motors, a Porsche garage in Los Angeles. James Dean headed down there, and when he heard the race-tuned engine fire up, he knew immediately that this car would give him the competitive edge he was looking for. This is how it would have sounded. The Porsche 550 was in silver, knee-high, and looked like it was doing 90 miles per hour when just standing still. With his newly acquired car, he intended to race at Salinas the following week. 2 nights after he bought the car, Jimmy went to the Villa Capri restaurant for dinner, a favorite haunt for the movie star. It was 7:30 p.m. when Jimmy spotted Alec Guinness, the famous English actor who many years later played the Jedi Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Star Wars franchise. This character could use the Force to see into the future. Anyway, Jimmy jumped up and invited Alec to eat with him. They enjoyed a pleasant evening and Alec was engaging to talk to. At the end of the night, Jimmy took Alec to the car park at the back of Villa Capri to show off his new car. When they returned, Alec was ashen-faced and visibly shaken. As soon as he had seen the Porsche, the future Jedi actor received an ominous vision of James Dean's crash. He urgently warned Jimmy not to drive the car at all costs, but Jimmy laughed it off and the evening continued. It was to be just over a week later that the horrific premonition came true. On the fateful day of the accident, Jimmy filled up the Porsche 550 in a garage in Los Angeles, but instead of towing it to the racetrack, he decided to run the motor in to get miles under his belt in what was still an unfamiliar car. He was to be followed by some friends in a station wagon with a trailer on the back. As Jimmy drove along with his fellow mechanic in the car, the temptation of the very highly tuned engine in the Porsche was just too irresistible to obey the relatively sedate speed limit. He opened the throttle to experience the power of the car, but unfortunately, just outside of Bakersfield, he was caught speeding and given a ticket at the roadside. It was to be the very last time he would ever sign his name. Later that afternoon, he pulled the Porsche over at Blackwell's Corner to have a Coke and an apple and chat to fellow racers who were also taking a rest break before he started the last leg of the journey. Pulling away from the service station at 5:15 p.m., he was less than 15 minutes away from a junction on Highway 466. As Jimmy descended out of the hills, the sun was low on the horizon and his small silver car blended almost invisibly into the road. This is how it would have looked.
Got it.
A large automobile, driven by Donald Turnipseed, was heading in the opposite direction when it veered across the road to take a left, straight across the path of James Dean's Porsche. Jimmy tried to swerve around the oncoming car, but to no avail. The Porsche struck the vehicle in an almost head-on crash. Jimmy was thrown forward, hitting his head against the headlight of the 1950s Ford, the impact breaking his neck. He lay trapped in the vehicle as it spun to rest in the dirt, his feet trapped in the pedals. A nurse who was quickly on the scene felt a weak pulse in his neck, but by the time he was transferred to hospital, he was pronounced dead. James Dean, a rising star in Hollywood, was dead at 24 years old. He never saw the release of the film that was to truly make him a global icon. His teen flick, Rebel Without a Cause, was released after his passing. Instead, he was only to make one lonely journey back to his hometown of Fairmount, Indiana, where he was buried. However, the story and mystery surrounding the ill-fated Porsche 550 sadly didn't end there. The Porsche 550 was an expensive acquisition in 1955, costing $6,800 then or $80,000 in today's money. After the crash, it was sold as a total loss to a fellow racer, and the engine and suspension were stripped from the wreck. The engine was put into a Lotus, and the suspension bolted into the Porsche of Troy Lee McHenry. In Troy's first race in this Porsche, the car left the racetrack on the first lap, hitting a tree, killing McHenry. The twisted remains of James Dean's Porsche 550 were then bought by George Barris, who loaned the car to the LA National Safety Chapter, who displayed the vehicle to improve road safety. Various mishaps occurred with the wreck, with it slipping off its stand and killing a truck driver responsible for moving it. Several years went by with the Porsche being moved around the country, being displayed in certain cities, but finally the unsolved mystery surrounding the car occurred. As it was being transported between Miami and Los Angeles in 1960 inside a sealed boxcar, it disappeared and has never been seen again. It was rumored to be placed behind a false wall in a house, but as of today, its whereabouts remain a mystery. So if you live in the United States in an old property, go and get your tape measure out and check the dimensions of your rooms in your house or barns. You never know. You may find a secret cavity behind one of the walls containing James Dean's Porsche.